seconds will be on Facebook.
Three real seconds, or 3 seconds plus
three Dan seconds.
3 Dan seconds.
Dan seconds, which of course means 8. So now we are.
Yeah. This podcast is just me telling you to hurry up. Good.
The Dan Broadbent story.
Get it moving. Good?
Yep.
All right,
yeah,
cool.
We're good.
All right, so going to actually get started. Okay, so tonight we are thrilled to be joined by Dr. David Gorski. Dr. Gorski is a surgical oncologist specializing in breast cancer surgery. Additionally, he's the managing editor and a writer at Science-Based Medicine, and he also writes under the name Orac at the Respectful Insolence blog. So, Dr. Gorski, thank you for joining us tonight.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So, I guess we're going to get started just with your backstory, and not just in medicine, but how you became, this fantastic outspoken advocate, like, against pseudoscience. Like, was there a moment where you're just like, I need to write and I need to debunk all this stuff?
Well, you guys seem a bit younger than I am, so let's go way back in time to the 1990s.
Right.
When I was in graduate school, I was doing my postdoc, and I discovered Usenet. Does anybody remember Usenet?
No.
Has anyone ever actually used?
I don't.
Here? Huh?
No, but I know that when I've gone to on Science-Based Medicine, I've seen that it has impacted your life.
I mean, basically, Usenet was before the web. Well, before the web, there are thousands and thousands of discussion forums all over the world. And I came across one called alt revisionism. Now, what kind of revisionism do you think this was?
Revisions?
Holocaust revisionism.
Yeah, I was going to guess history. Yeah, all that great stuff.
And I came across posts by who I later, first off, I had never realized there was such a thing as Holocaust denial. So before that, so this is 1998 or so. It fades in the memory here now that it's I can't believe it's approaching 20 years. But in any case, I started reading this stuff, and some of it was medical. He was claiming about how in the camps, they actually treated, they actually would treat them well and feed them milk to get them back up to strength when they had problems.
They gave them gummy bears, and it was
and he went on about
a happy time.
They really didn't have protein. It all went into the various forms of starvation. Well, to make a long story short, because that was sort of my gateway drug into skepticism, and I was active on alt revisionism for a few years until, like most of Usenet, it deteriorated into spam and trolls and everything. I don't know if too many people use Usenet anymore, although it does still exist as Google Groups. In any case, a year or two later, I discovered another Usenet news group called. It basically was an alternative medicine news group, and that's where I discovered the various forms of quackery, the anti-vaccine stuff. So I had about so I started my blog in December of 2004. Although it didn't really get going till 2005. I was just kind of dabbling until then. And so I had 6 years of, experience on Usenet. And at that point, I sort of did it on a whim once. It was this, I remember it was this gray, dank Saturday. And I set it up on Blogger, and I guess the rest is history. About a year later, Science Blogs invited me to join, and I still can't. I still have a hard time believing Science Blog still exists, but it does. And I guess I've been too lazy to move, so.
So you're there.
So I've been. Yeah, I know. I mean, it must be a record. I've been at the same place for 11 years now.
and obviously the work that you do, it has resonated with like people like us who are definitely fans of what you do. And then, well, Kevin Folta had a question.
Well, I didn't get into, and then of course Steve invited me to be part of Science.
Oh, that's right. Yes.
You know, like in late 2007, and that was the.
So yeah, so you're just.
To be honest, science-based medicine has taken off more than my old personal blog. It's definitely much more widely read than my personal blog.
I mean, it just seems like such a go-to, like, great resource for anybody who's looking for articles, you know, debunking various forms of pseudoscience and quackery. And so, I mean, I know, like, we definitely frequent it and, you know, appreciate the work that you guys do. And so then, obviously, in sort of the alt med and pseudoscience and woo like communities, there are people who probably aren't as happy about all the stuff that like
that would
like you do, like
yes.
You know, like Mike Adams. Kevin
so
asked us to ask you how has he impacted your life and practice?
Okay.
The Health Ranger.
On the one hand,
keep in mind we can only do this live stream for 4 hours, so let's try to keep it brief.
Well, in any case, on the one hand, I'm happy to talk about it. On the other hand, I hate to acknowledge that he's caused me any issues. But so about a year ago, a little more than a year ago now, for whatever reason, and I can't figure out what it was, I think it had to do with me writing about Andrew Wakefield's movie Vaxxed and the whole Tribeca thing where, you know, it was where it was accepted and then pulled. He started writing articles about me, you know, that were basically, personal attacks. You could basically call them libelous, although he's very clever in that he always leaves some plausible deniability, in his articles that would make it very difficult to actually sue him for libel. And of course, he actually, I suspect, wants to be sued.
Like get some attention or something with
either that. I think one time he showed up. One time he actually showed up on the blog and just said one word: discovery. You know the process of discovery in a lawsuit, right?
Right.
So yeah. So he just popped in and gave you that. And
in any case, basically, for about 2 or 3 months, it was like almost every day. I think since I've collected the links to everything that he did, and we're up into the 40s, you know, over the course of a year. Granted, that most of that was concentrated in those like initial 3 months, and then every so often he still throws something out at me. He just did it a couple weeks ago on that article about breast surgeons supposedly doing double mastectomies for no reason. I'm surprised he hasn't come after me based on that case of the British surgeon that was in the news recently who actually did do a lot of unnecessary surgery. I'm sure it's coming.
He's working on it. Like, so he obviously just pays attention to everything you do. And
well, I don't know. I mean,
say that, or you just have an idea.
I mean, I don't know. The guy, I fluctuate between whether I think the guy is just nuts or he's just a con man or both. I don't know, because that's basically
maybe a little bit of both.
I mean, I think there has to be an element of true belief there, but on the other hand, man, the stuff he says is just so off the wall.
It's really just a ruse to launch his rap career.
I mean, yes, his career as a musician is painful to behold. I don't know if you ever saw his vaccine zombie video.
I watched the GMO one. I think we even featured it on an early episode of our show here.
Vaccine zombie on his site. It is
like, and okay, so to us, like, it seems like he's this sort of like caricature, like almost like somebody created this weird dude saying all, like the fact that he has music, like it's just so strange. But there are people that go to like natural news and use that as a resource. How does this happen?
Very popular. If you search for my name, some of his at least a couple of his hit pieces will show up on the first page.
Yeah, like I know Truth Wiki. Yeah, exactly.
Truth Wiki entry about me, which is also natural news. It's Mike Adams owns Truth Wiki. You know, he put it together. So, I mean, obviously that's not good. It's basically my Google reputation is trashed.
Well, he's not. He's not
sure.
Like. Yeah, the stuff he's sharing is not very intelligent, but he has that computer background, so he knows how to manipulate search engine.
Oh, you know how he got his start, don't you?
I'm sure if we looked at his bio, it would say. I mean, I know. I know. No, is it not in his bio?
Topic of another podcast.
No, he got started in the late '90s selling Y2K stuff.
Right.
Oh, no way! I didn't know that.
Yes,
I just knew that he like didn't do drugs and he knows martial arts. I know that from his bio.
He has no criminal record.
No criminal record.
Never been arrested.
Well,
he chose not to attend graduate school.
And he supposedly cured himself of type 2 diabetes through diet, which, I mean, the thing about that is, yes, it is possible to cure yourself of type 2 diabetes through diet if you lose enough weight and exercise. I don't know if or I should say you can control it. You know, you not really cure it.
Right.
Yeah. So he's a fan. He's a fan of people who speak about science.
Well, I mean, you mentioned Kevin Folta. He went after him too.
Oh, see, I guess I didn't realize that Mike Adams went after Kevin too. It's always Monty Hari on my mind when I.
You probably don't remember this, but he put up a website called Monsanto Collaborators.
Oh,
was that the one that got him investigated by the FBI?
That was the one that was like borderline death threats that he had to take down because the FBI actually went and talked to him about it.
Like, Mike, you can't do this to people.
But in any case,
so there are people that buy into all of this kind of hype about, well, like, you know, somebody probably watched his vaccine zombie music video and thought, this guy's onto something. Whatever. I mean,
seriously, you gotta watch that video.
Which is strange. I know what I'm doing as soon as we're done with this tonight. I'm going to be Googling that and watching it.
The video is basically a takeoff on Michael Jackson.
Like Thriller
in the background. Don't worry.
Okay, that's why we got it.
It's all right. It's real life. So, okay. So speaking of that, we'll wait till
this is still happening.
Last ring. Sorry about that.
Last ring.
You know what it is? It's this fundraiser that calls every night about this time.
Now it's Mike Adams. He heard that we're talking about him.
Oh, well, that would be funny, but
no.
Well, one of these days, we may meet face to face.
It might happen, right? Yeah.
I don't think.
Right,
so. I don't think someone like him really wants that though. I think he enjoys the taking shots from afar. I don't think he obviously doesn't want to honestly engage and discuss that because he knows he can't
obviously not
support anything.
No, clearly not. And I mean, the other thing that he did, which is so blatantly obvious, is that he targeted my cancer institute. So he started saying horrible things about my cancer institute. He started trying to link me to a doctor by the name of Farid Fatah. I don't know if you heard it. About 2 or 3 years ago, this is the guy who was arrested for and convicted of giving patients a lot more chemotherapy than they needed and giving some patients who didn't even have cancer chemotherapy. He was like a perfect villain for a guy like Adams, and he happened to work close enough to one of our satellite clinics at the time that they Adams tried to link him to my cancer center and me. So and there was no link. And in fact, at the time he was arrested, I had written, just how horrible this guy is. And it's like,
wow. So he just
so he's trying to make trouble for me at work.
by association.
He's not the first,
yeah.
but he's like probably the biggest.
Because he has this big platform and people listen to what he says, which seems strange, but they do, because he presents this like alternate sort of worldview to what like big pharma and whatever the biotech industry that's killing us through our food and whatever conspiracy theory, because he has all of them, I think.
Oh yeah, he's GMOs, vaccines.
Is he a chemtrailer too?
No, I'm trying to think of the name of the video. He did a video that basically claimed that, he is like the keeper of true science, and scientists are evil, and that, science is responsible for the Holocaust, and et cetera, et cetera.
So he just takes it to 11. This guy just
I don't think he can set it below 11.
he just goes for it. And yeah, so it's
I mean, in a way that plays in my favor, because the guy is so obviously nutty that when people see his stuff, they,
Well, it's because it is easy to mock, because it is so out there and ridiculous, like that he doesn't just stick to like, vaccines and medicine and that kind of stuff. He goes all over the place. So he doesn't discriminate.
And at the risk of getting political, he's a very strong Trump supporter.
Oh, I follow him on Twitter, and
he's also like a rising star in the alt-right.
Really? See, I didn't know that bit.
Oh yeah, he was major Trump. Like he was so stoked.
Well,
on
he used to work for Alex Jones. Like he did videos for Alex Jones until there was some parting of the ways a couple of years ago.
I didn't know that, but I'm not surprised. I'm not at all surprised by that. Wow. Oh geez, like there's so much crazy and so many levels of crazy, even just in like this one person. And then they're like, I don't even know. There's a lot. And now, okay, so I want to talk about some, like, I mean, we talk about vaccines, we talk about kind of an anti-vax movement that still exists, which to me seems, again, kind of out there, that people don't really care about, vaccine preventable diseases coming back or whatever. You live in Michigan, right?
Right.
So I saw on Facebook you had recently written like your representative or something about some legislation.
My state
happening.
Representative, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what's happening in Michigan having to do with vaccines and exemptions and all that?
Okay. Well, Michigan, over the last several years, has had an absolutely atrocious vaccine uptake and exemption rates. Like for personal belief exemptions, PBEs as they call them, which basically I like to refer to as I don't wanna, because
yes,
it had more of a lack. It was very lax. All parents had to do was like write a little letter or sign a little form and say, and give it to the school. So in late 2014, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services decided to try to do something about it. And what they did was they made an administrative rule that said that, well, parents could, obviously they couldn't ban non-medical exemptions because that would require a change in the law. But what they said was, if you want a non-medical exemption, two things. First, you have to go to your county health office and sit through an educational session on the risks of, not vaccinating and non-vaccine preventable diseases, et cetera. And second, you have to use the state mandated form, in which you're basically acknowledging the risk to your child and to the community of not vaccinating. And it actually worked. Exemptions are down by something like 35% since then. Vaccination rates have gone up. And of course, this did not sit well with the, anti-vaccine people here in Michigan.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, they could still get their personal belief exemptions. It was just a bit more difficult. You had to go to the county health office. And yeah, you had to sit through, I don't know how long the educational session is, but you had to sit through, and I mean, if you're a really true believer, okay, you do it and you just like roll your eyes while you listen to the,
just like it's a formality. You just do it. Yeah.
But they hated the idea of this. And unfortunately, what's happened in the last 5 years or so, it predates Trump, but I think Trump put it on steroids, is the idea of linking freedom and anti-government conservatism and, parental quote unquote rights to the idea of being able to opt out of vaccines. And it's been a very effective political strategy because basically, and it's where, it's not just Michigan, Texas. There was an article recently about how in Texas, it's really been, the anti-vaccine movement is really linked up with like Tea Party conservatives, et cetera. But it's the same thing here in Michigan. In any case, bills were introduced in the House and the Senate to, that would, one, get rid of the rule, rescind the rule. Two, tell the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services that it can't make rules like that in the future. And the three, and this is the really bad one that I cannot for the life of me understand, forbid the Department of Health and Human Services from writing a rule that would empower local health officials to ban unvaccinated children from school in the event of an outbreak or cases of vaccine preventable disease in the school. Which
so
is,
you want a population that's susceptible.
It's basically, okay, it's a way to turn one case into an outbreak, a small outbreak into a large outbreak. It's like,
yeah,
because keeping kids out of school, that's like, that works early. Once you have a significant outbreak, the cat's, the horse is left, the barn door is open, it's closing the barn door after the horse is out.
So it is just, it's opening up this possibility to people, children getting sick.
Right. And I mean, so I wrote to my representative, whose name is Jeff Noble, and so did my wife. And so it's Saturday, we both got identical letters, that basically said, thanks for writing, but this is about freedom, or like, this is about government overreach. That's the other thing. And the funny thing is, what he said is exactly the same language that you find on like the Michigan, one of the Michigan anti-vaccine groups. It's like something at Michigan for Vaccine Choice, I think is what it is. It's like almost the same language. And it's not a coincidence, I think, that a few months ago, back in the fall, Del Bigtree, if you know who he is.
Oh, we know who he is.
Producer of Vaxxed.
Yep.
Yes.
Fantastic filmmaker.
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, he says, they claim Wakefield directed the movie, but.
Del Bigtree, which, like, best worst name ever. Like.
Smarmy as hell. In any case,
exactly what he sounds like.
Michigan back in October and met with a bunch of our legislators, and one who is fortunately no longer in the legislature because of term limits, Tom Hooker. I mean, they put a video up of this guy, and I mean, he's like laying down every anti-vaccine trope in the book, plus the whole freedom angle, plus the plus the whole thing about how girls in good families don't need Gardasil because they won't be promiscuous. That brain dead argument. These are our legislators here.
These are the people that are in charge. Wow.
So in any case, we got that letter back, and that kind of annoyed me enough to write that post for Monday. Of course, my other representative, my state senator, Patrick Kolbeck, is a piece of work himself. He's sponsoring the Senate versions of these bills, whereas my representative is my state representative is sponsoring the House of Representatives versions of these bills. And not only that, but like a while back, he was promoting trace amounts on his Facebook page, which, if you remember that movie, it's yet another anti-vaccine propaganda film.
Yeah.
Of the Mercury variety, if I recall correctly. That's one that I actually didn't see. I've seen most of them, but that one I haven't seen.
I haven't seen that. I've seen Vaxxed, which is just a piece of shit movie.
I've seen The Greater Good. I've seen...
I love the titles that they give these things too, to like sensationalize the whole.
But in any case, well, he's also like, unfortunately, being receptive to this sort of thing is not his only issue. I mean, I've seen him question evolution on his, Facebook page and being kind of intelligent design. He's a climate science denialist for sure, big time. I could go on. So
all the things, just open to all of it.
I feel like I'm living like in Mississippi or something as far as my representation goes.
I would say I'm in Indiana, and I mean, it's not
okay. I could be in Indiana too. Well, you had Mike Pence.
I know. I posted on like 15 different people's statuses today. Like, we weren't joking when we said how fucking awful this guy is. He is literally the worst. Like, it wasn't.
You weren't kidding.
Indiana, that he's caused an AIDS outbreak in Indiana, that he's just literally like one of the worst people, worse than Trump, in my opinion.
Well, I know. I'm so torn when people say they hope that Trump is forced to resign, and I'm like, no. Yeah, but the replacement.
He's actually like awful. Good at his job. Like, he's awful ideology, but he knows how to get shit done because he did in Indiana. He didn't like the rules, so he changed them.
Yeah.
So, in any case, fortunately, I just learned today that the governor opposes this. So, of course, it's Governor Snyder. The whole Flint water crisis, because we got the whole Flint water crisis. It's still going on here 2 years later. So,
Michigan.
But
so do you want to not be diseased, or do you want to drink water? Like, you have to choose.
But the one I can say one good thing about Governor Snyder, and that he opposes these idiotic bills. So I doubt they'll go anywhere, because on the other hand, he has buckled to our far right fringe before. So even though I doubt he would sign the bills, I'm not sure enough of it that I want them to go any further.
Well, so hopefully it doesn't go anywhere. I mean, the idea though, like what you said, that they call it vaccine choice, like,
but
they try to. It's like a euphemism for like,
Well, you know what I call I can't. I don't know if I'm the first to do this, but I may have been. I refer to these things as basically anti-vaccine dog whistles. Basically, freedom. Parental rights, that sort of thing, and it's been very effective, which is part of the, it used to be, the cliche used to be that anti-vaxxers were all liberal, crunchy, hippy-dippy, coastal types, and they still exist. But the loudest voices of the anti-vaccine movement have, over the last few years, have been consistently moving right. I mean, I wrote an article like 2015 or something. Is the Republican Party becoming the anti-vaccine party? Because there's so much anti-vaccine rhetoric at the second Republican presidential debate that, and of course there's Donald Trump, who's been spewing anti-vaccine nonsense since at least 2007, which is the first time I noticed him. as
that kind of person.
The only good thing I can say about it is that he hasn't really done anything about it. Yeah, he met with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., but as far as I know, he hasn't done anything.
Well, yeah, and so hopefully on that kind of level, it doesn't become even worse than it is. And so like, as far as medicine goes, people are refusing vaccines or not wanting to put any of that into their children's bodies or whatever. But then it seems like people are embracing alternative medicine and complementary alternative medicine and all of that. And so, like, because one of our friends asked this too, it's like, what, like, how has CAM kind of become this big thing that people are choosing?
I mean, this goes back, like, even before I became interested in any of this stuff, because I mean, this is the sort of thing, this goes back to at least the 60s or 70s, although it really picked up steam in the 90s. And, you know, it's, I don't know that I understand the history of it well enough, but first off, it's, I think that, you know, part of it's distrust of, you know, the traditional, like, pharma and government, et cetera, which has obviously gotten worse over the last 20 some odd years. But second, it's like a brilliant, again, it's co-opting language the way that, like, the anti-vaxxers did. So you start out, you know, as I like to say, okay, it started out, once there was quackery. Okay. Then it became alternative medicine. But that still wasn't good enough, because it implied, you know, that it wasn't really medicine. It was like kind of alternative. It wasn't a real thing. So then it became complementary and alternative medicine, which is like, oh no, we don't use it instead of real medicine. We use it with real medicine.
Like they're together working like as a partnership, right?
But that term ruled for a good 15 plus years. I mean, from the 90s until, you know, maybe like, you know, 2010, you know, in the later part of the first decade of the 2000s. Yeah. But that wasn't good enough, because complementary still implies a subsidiary status. It's the icing on the cake. It's complementary. It's not quite medicine. So thus was born integrative medicine. We are integrating.
And so how's that defined?
Equals. This is the best of both worlds, and that is now and it's even gone beyond that now, because, you know, I'm seeing another evolution, and it's there in the name of what NCAM. If you know NCAM, when they renamed it, what did they call it? The National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health. So they're not even calling it medicine anymore. It's integrative health. And I've noticed this more and more. The more I look at it, the more I'm seeing examples, and I don't know if it's confirmation bias or if it's really a thing, but it's.
So it seems like it's all about language, and it's all about kind of selling, in a way, like selling this, well, it's an alternative to kind of the pharma and doctors and scientists who actually know how the body works.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and I'm, you know, we have to take our lumps as a medical profession, because, for instance, there are doctors that I know to be good doctors who are working, for instance, with naturopaths, but they have no idea what naturopathy is. They just think it's like this kind of natural thing. So, for instance, in 2014, I somehow managed to, I had been invited to write a review article on integrative oncology for Nature Reviews Cancer, which, like, was a big deal, man. It's probably my highest, you know, highest impact factor journal I've ever been in. So, and you know, I won't go through the details, but there was a part where I talked about homeopathy. Now, the Society of Integrative Oncology was not happy with my review and wrote a letter, of course, you know, and they said, well, we don't do homeopathy. We know homeopathy is, you know, bogus. I'm paraphrasing, obviously.
Yeah.
Right.
So my response was, okay, you recently published clinical guidelines on breast cancer, and I forget if it was two or three of the authors were naturopaths. Do you know that all naturopaths study homeopathy? It's part of naturopathy. It's so much part of naturopathy that all the big naturopathy schools devote significant course time to it. And
Well,
in
that's
fact,
because,
in the
that's
States,
because they spend more time. They spend more time than actual medical doctors, though, in training in school.
I know, don't get me started on
I was
that.
asking to tell you all about it.
But that, and that's not all. In states where naturopaths are licensed, they take an exam, which I would love to see. It's called the NPLEX. But there's a section in the NPLEX on homeopathy. Not only that, but most naturopaths use homeopathy. Not all, I'll admit, some of them don't, but most of them do. Finally, one of your naturopath co-authors, is the principal investigator, or was at the time a principal investigator on a homeopathy trial. And you don't know this? It's like, come on.
Well, right, to just not even have a sense that this is something that is included in the practice of, like, naturopaths study this.
There's a blind spot, and among some of my colleagues, who have embraced this, that they just don't, they think it's just yoga. I got nothing against yoga. It's exercise. Exercise is good. We know this. It's like exercise is part of regular medicine. We tell patients to exercise all the time. We know eating a better diet is good. We know losing weight is good. That's fine. We don't need a separate specialty called integrative medicine to do that. And of course, if that's all it was, that specialty wouldn't exist. It exists because of the woo.
Well, and then when people decide that, to kind of forego anything in like real medicine and then just do some of the crazy stuff, like use black salve or other just like, quote unquote natural remedies for things, like how do you feel as an oncologist and a scientist, doctor, and when you hear about people doing this kind of stuff?
Well, it always either saddens or upsets me. I'm fortunate in that I don't see too many patients who have done that. But, occasionally I'll see a patient who's neglected her breast cancer because she's gone to a naturopath or whoever, some alternative treatment, and it's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and started to erode through the skin and all of that. I do, maybe once a year see that. And at that point, it's really, the management is really hard, whereas it wouldn't have been quite so hard, a year ago, or, it's, but that's fairly easy to talk. I don't know of any doctor who would really say that's okay. But then you say, well, okay, she was using these methods instead of, what I say is, she was using these methods instead of medicine. But you don't have a problem with her using these methods with medicine, even though it's just as much quackery, either way, it's the same thing. It's just, okay, but she's getting real medicine too. I could sort of see a moral argument, I guess, if you say, well, if you don't let her do this along with the medicine, she might not get the real medicine. She might go all for the alternative. Okay, I can see that argument. I could even make that argument. But we as physicians should not be encouraging that.
Yeah. So is it just about trying to steer them in the right? Yeah. Well, because that's the thing, because it is that tricky thing of like, want somebody.
Tolerate that, but we should.
Yeah. Right. And that's where I feel like
it is what it takes to get the patient treated, but we should not be offering it or,
encouraging it in any way, right? Because it is quackery. And yes. And so that just has to be the tricky thing as a physician, to want the best for the patient and to steer them in the right direction where they're not wanting to give in to that.
And the other thing that bothers me is the way integrative medicine has basically co-opted what should be science-based modalities like diet, exercise, etc. I like to point out, for instance, that if you're someone who's newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, what does the American Diabetic Association say that the first intervention should be? Put you on metformin? Lose weight.
Is it diet and exercise? Right? Yeah.
Metformin you don't get put on metformin until that fails.
Yeah. So, and because I think it seems like it's forgotten that all of this stuff, you know, diet, exercise, whatever, it's not forgotten by, a regular doctor. That's all part of being a healthy person.
The other thing that they like to make it seem like it's easy to get people to do this stuff. It's like, okay, one reason maybe primary care doctors may sometimes not emphasize this stuff the way as much as we would like is because it's really hard to get patients to do this stuff. It's like, it's not easy.
Yeah, and so you do what you can, right? And then, like, if
and a lot of patients actually just want to take a pill as opposed to change their.
Well, and I think even then, and even then, it's if you're taking something that you're told is natural or came from the earth or whatever, that's like you're doing something while like not doing something, not being active, not changing your diets, but it feels better, and that's what's more important to them is how it feels than is effective or is helping anything.
Yeah.
But and none of this ever goes away. I just had a patient the other day ask me if it was okay to take vitamin B17. Now, do you know what vitamin B17 is?
Metabolizes into metabolites cyanide.
It's Laetrile. It's like it's Laetrile. If you remember Laetrile from the from the 70s, it was that was sort of I vaguely remember it because I was in high school at the time, and obviously wasn't paying attention to or interested in this stuff back then. But I do vaguely remember it. There were a couple of big stars who went for that. And still died anyway. But I mean, these are stars who had, like, I think Michael Landon actually went for some Laetrile because he had pancreatic cancer, which is a really bad one, and he probably he would have died either way. But it's.
Oh, so one of our other friends, Michael, asked a question just having to do with people who are terminally ill, and asked like about right to try laws. What are your thoughts on, like if somebody has a terminal illness?
Right to try is a phenomenon that's kind of it's very difficult to advocate against, even though it's potentially horrible for patients.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why it's gone. I think the first right to try passed about 3 years ago, roughly, and now there are right to try laws in 33 states. It's a very conscious. Well, here's the thing. So, what are right to try laws? So basically they say if you have a terminal illness, you can have access to an experimental therapeutic that has, if the company agrees, that has passed phase 1 testing and is still in active development. Now, phase 1 is a really low bar for safety. Basically, phase 1 trials they're sometimes called first-in-human trials because that's what they are. You take about maybe 20, 30 patients, and they give it at different doses, and they're just looking for the worst toxicities. That's all they're looking for. Are the toxicities at these doses manageable to the point where we can move on and try a bigger clinical trial? Is there any indication of activity? But indication of activity is not absolutely necessary for a phase 1 trial because the numbers are so small. The idea is it's a safety trial, basically. But it's a really low bar. And most medications that pass phase 1 don't get through phase 3, which is, phase 2 are the smaller randomized trials, and then phase 3 is the big randomized trial that you do before getting approved. Here are some aspects of right to try laws that are very bad for patients. First off, there's no mechanism for payment. So basically, if you're rich or can raise a lot of money, you you might be able to do the right to try. There is it basically strips patient protections. there's, at this point, it's good to talk about expanded access programs with the FDA. If you get drugs through an expanded access program in the FDA, you are still under all of the patient protections of the clinical trials that are going on, and there's an institutional review board. Your case is still overseen by that. They still have to give the drugs to you by the protocol. They have to, there are protections. Right to try, no protection, and if you, it also the laws in some of the states can even be interpreted as saying, well, first they definitely say that insurance companies don't have to pay for it, which you can, it's experimental therapeutics. They don't usually pay for experimental therapeutics anyway. But it can be interpreted as saying that if you have a complication due to like a right to try drug, that they don't have to pay for the care that complication requires. Yeah. I mean, and then doctors, companies, they're all immunized against lawsuits. So even if your doctor screws up something awful while giving you a right to try drug, you can't sue.
So as a patient, you're kind of signing away all of.
You're signing away a lot of patient protection.
Yeah.
And of course, companies aren't that thrilled about this because they see only bad. First off, some of the smaller companies, they may have put all their money, all their capital into making up enough drug to do the clinical trials that they need to do, and there's not much left over. So they may be very reluctant. And of course, these laws don't mandate that they do it, but then they get, they look bad if they don't. Now, fortunately, federal law, supersedes state law. So, I mean, I've called right to try placebo legislation because it looks like you're doing something. It makes you feel good, but you're really doing nothing, However, that doesn't mean that they're not pernicious. The problem is that if this is a conscious strategy on the part of the Goldwater Institute, which is the libertarian think tank that came up with the template that almost all of these laws follow. There's a conscious strategy on the part of the Goldwater Institute to pass as many of these laws as they can at the state level in order to pressure the feds to pass a federal right to try law. And there have been 2 attempts that I'm aware of so far at that, and both have so far, well, the first one failed. There's another one that's in committee but doesn't seem to be going anywhere. However, there are rumors that right to try advocates, there's something very big happening this year as far as the FDA, which is the law that allows the FDA to charge drug companies for their approval activities is up for renewal this year. I believe it expires at the end of September, I believe. So it has to be renewed, or the FDA can't charge drug companies anymore. There are right to try advocates who there have been reports that there are right to try advocates are trying to get right to try language put into that bill renewal, with the thought that if they succeed at doing that, no one's gonna stop that bill from passing or veto that bill just for right to try, and then it'll be baked into the FDA's financial legislation for the next 7 years, because I think if I recall correctly, I think it's every 7 years that this law has to be renewed. I don't know where that's going to go, because I mean the Trump administration has, from what I understand, has expressed support for right to try. The federal bills are even worse though than the state, because one of the worries that the companies have is that, okay, if we do right to try, the results are still reportable to the FDA, and so if something bad happens to a patient, then that could affect our application for approval, for FDA approval. So what the federal right to try law does is it says that the FDA, if the FDA cannot consider what happens to people who get the drug under right to try in their deliberations over whether to approve the drug or not. Which, think about it. Let's say there's a drug where a bunch of people got it and they like died or had horrible reactions. The FDA would then be by law barred from considering those and deciding whether to.
So it's just the complicated kind of structure of all of it and making decisions and even
now
just,
there's now expanded, there are expanded access programs and compassionate use and almost all of the, and they could be less bureaucratic. The FDA made a lot of progress over the last couple of years in making it easier to apply for expanded access, and they actually do approve like 99% of the applications get approved. So if you view this as a problem, the way to attack it is through expanded access, like reforming expanded access. But that's not the goal. The goal of these, of the Goldwater Institute and a lot of these right to try advocates is that they want to weaken the FDA, neuter. I like to say they want to neuter the FDA. And they're using
said as much, or at least strongly implied as much.
And they want to weaken the FDA, and they're using terminally ill patients in their desperation as the vehicle to do it. I always said that one of the things, it's really hard to speak out against right to try because it's like speaking out against mom, apple pie, and puppies. It's difficult to explain, but I mean that's how it's perceived. It's really difficult to explain in a way that people will buy why these laws are bad ideas. They just hear you're helping terminally ill patients get experimental drugs. It's why would you ever want to why would you not want to do that? How could
Right, because on the surface it seems like, trying to help people in sort of a moment, but there's so much more to it when you look a little.
There's also a lot of magical thinking behind these bills, but there's like all these experimental therapeutics out there that are going to save all these terminally ill patients, and there aren't. Okay, drugs are almost always incremental improvements, if that. And by the time a patient is terminally ill, the chances that any new experimental drug is going to make the difference is really slim. Then the other argument that people make is, well, how could it be worse? Or, they're going to die anyway. And I say, well, it can always be worse. It could be worse that you spend your life savings and have nothing to give to your family as an inheritance. You could suffer complications that kill you faster and you lose, however many months you might have had left. You could suffer horrible complications so that you die in worse pain than you would have otherwise. It can always be worse.
Well, and I think that kind of just the idea of magical thinking, permeates a lot of these conversations too. Whether it's, don't vaccinate your kids because, they'll be fine, everything's good. Use, experimental treatments because, it might cure you. There's a lot of magical thinking in the movie world.
Anti-vaccine movements, anti-vaccine ideas are a good idea. There's a lot of this idea that if you eat the right foods, do the right exercise, stay healthy, take the right supplements, that your immune system will be so strong that you don't need vaccines, that you will, and you can find this sentiment without too much difficulty. So,
yeah, and I know Dan has
vaccines, or my children don't need vaccines because they're healthy.
I know Dan has one final question for kind of dealing with the terminally ill people.
Just kind of along those lines. I'm totally it's a complicated issue to answer that because, like you said, you have the good and the bad as far as right to try. So I was just kind of wondering, where do you fall at with the death with dignity legislation, or do you think people should have a right that are that have been confirmed as terminally ill
Oh, that's a tough one, and I vacillate on that one. I really do. I certainly believe that patients who are of sound mind, et cetera, who are, should have the absolute right to refuse treatment. As long as they understand the consequences. An adult, obviously children are different, but an adult has the absolute right or autonomy to refuse treatment unless doing so will somehow harm others. Although the only way you can imagine that is in the case of infectious disease, and in worst case scenario, you quarantine them.
Right.
So I certainly believe that. Whether physicians should be euthanizing patients is something I have a bit of a problem with, and maybe it's my old Catholic upbringing, or maybe I just have a hard time coming to support that.
Right.
Because I do tend to take the Hippocratic Oath seriously, which is you shall not harm patients with your art, and I guess you can argue on the definition of the word harm, but right. I have a hard time embracing, physician-assisted suicide. I have no problem hospice, refusing treatment, palliative care, all of it. And in fact, if our palliative care system were better, there might be fewer patients who want physician-assisted suicide. On the other hand, I don't think that, in places where it's been allowed, that all the horrible things that, opponents predicted have come to pass,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how Natalie feels, as I don't think we've ever talked about it on our own, but I know I've never talked about how did I, topic of a different podcast, but yeah. I mean, I don't, like you said, like you don't want to do harm. I don't see it as, just with me, and of course I'm not a physician, so I don't have that experience that you do. So that's why I was interested just to hear your thoughts, because like if we know like 100% like that, and I don't see value in having somebody just on painkillers and just making sure that they're comfortable, and if they're half alert, or and this is off the top of my head, I can't think of the woman, I don't know if it was last fall or last summer, out in Oregon or someplace, who had just an awful aggressive brain cancer, where she just has episodes where it's just loses control and just doesn't have any idea what's going on. It's just horrifying things like that. Like I don't like allowing that to happen. If somebody is able to I guess I don't even know how to phrase this correctly, address it or expedite the process, like I feel like that's more humane if it is truly what that person wants. And we've no, go ahead.
I didn't say anything.
Oh no, I thought you did. But I feel like that's more humane than like I said, just kind of. But like I said, you have much more obviously experience with that.
I can understand that argument. Part of it might be being part of the profession that would be asked to do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right, because that carries a different weight, right? Because you like to be the person that is usually, I guess, in the role of providing treatment and wanting to extend the life. But there has to be a big emotional sort of component with it too. And so it would be somebody who is really, I guess, given a lot of thought to like that being like a thing that they feel very, or I guess as comfortable as one could feel doing something like that for patients. And so, it has to be just a lot. And I can't really imagine putting myself in the position of the person who would have to administer whatever or help in that way. But it's a complicated issue, but I see it, I think, from the point of view of a patient and a person who is at that state, like you were talking about, Dan, where it's just too much.
I'm just saying that's what I would want. if I'm not aware of my surroundings, just like if I'm on, if I'm in a persistent vegetative state, like I don't. That's not what I want.
Yeah.
How I want to be remembered. And so on that positive note,
man,
leave it to me. Like that's what I always do. I always do that.
Okay, all right. So you know what? I'm gonna end with like just.
Oh yeah, we got a question from David.
I have the weird question. So David James, our mutual friend, he has a real hard-hitting question that we're gonna end this whole thing on after we talked about assisted suicide.
I feel like this is really gonna expose.
So this is what he needs to know. Well, actually, he says inquisitive housewives want to know. Are you going to keep the beard?
Oh, well, it was kind of on a whim that I started it, which I assume is how a lot of guys started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to my shock, I've had it for like 6 months, 5 or 6 months now. I guess the answer is, in the short term, yes. In the long term, I don't know.
So everybody wait and see. And now
So if I have some speaking engagements later in the year, so I'm sure I'll probably have it for Nexus. I doubt I'll get rid of it before then. So that leaves in October, QED Con and CSI Con.
I'll be at that one with you. I'm also speaking.
I saw your name. You're like somewhere near where.
Yeah, I'm there.
I haven't actually decided what to talk about yet. They're bugging me for a topic.
Well, I'm showing my Science Moms movie, and then it's a 30-minute documentary, and then doing like a Q&A afterwards, kind of evidence-based parenting, mostly like GMO and vaccine type of stuff, but parenting, critical thinking, not being Gwyneth Paltrow, and
who now has a new magazine.
I saw that. It boggles my mind that she just continues her quest to like make everyone so dumb. Like it's so bad. But we should just do a whole podcast about Gwyneth Paltrow sometime, Dan. But all right, if people,
I've been meaning to go into her website and just poke around. Because every so often you hear the weird things, and a lot of them seem to have to do with, let's face it, female genitals.
Her vagina.
Like you got the
it's all about that.
You got the jade eggs. You got the
eggs. Yeah, and then she was selling, I think, some it was like moon dust and sex dust or something.
I'm on her website right now. She's got a tote bag for $536, a pair of jeans for $255, which is a deal if you look at the Nordstrom mud jeans that we featured last week on the show.
The what jeans?
Nordstrom has a pair of jeans out that
the ones that are made dirty.
The mud jeans. Yeah, the dirty ones. True Americana without doing the work for $425.
Right. Being the skeptics we are curious, like, does the mud wash off? Like, are you able to wash them at all?
Is it real mud?
Is it real mud? What is it?
Where's the mud sourced from? Is it?
It's organic, locally sourced mud from wherever you purchase.
Is it artificial mud, chemicals?
Ooh, then that's just a whole level of bad. Somebody's gonna end up criticizing the mud jeans because they're gonna be like, that's
Yeah, that'll be what brings them down.
That'll be what brings them down. That's gonna bring down Nordstrom.
Why isn't Mike Adams on this?
So call to action, Mike Adams, investigate the mud jeans and then investigate the clear knee mom jeans too. Yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole. You saw those. Those are hideous too. It's a greenhouse for your legs. All right, so to wrap this up with all of our fashion talk, where can people find you on the internet?
Like, what the hell just happened here?
What's that?
So tell people your Twitter, blogs, like where can they find you on the internet?
Twitter is Gorskan, which is, basically my name with an O-N instead of an I at the end. It's like, But sciencebasedmedicine.org is the other blog. Respectful Insolence is scienceblogs.com/insolence.
All right. Well, thank you for talking to us tonight, covering a whole wide range of topics, from vaccines
Like
to
all the
assisted
topics.
suicide to mud jeans.
Oh, I did not expect it to go to the assisted suicide.
It went there, broadbent. Thanks, Dan. Dan's a
I did not see that
Constantly, I'm hyper aware of my mortality.
Yeah, you're always surprising me with the cheerfulness of all of this. So
nobody even brought up William Shatner.
We specifically.
We figured,
I know.
We're told not to. We were told. Your agent told us not to.
He's old news and old misinformed Star Trek man. I know him as. All right. So yeah, this was fun. All right, Dan.
Thanks guys for watching.
All right. Thank you.
All right, let's make sure the tracks